Uh, It's time to convene the December 6th meeting of the Natural Resources and Environmental Commission here in South Pasadena. I'm Bill Kelly, and I'm acting as chair tonight in the absence of our regular chair. So this is a meeting that is done in hybrid form. And so if there are people on Zoom, they can listen. They can also comment at the appropriate time during the public comment period or on any item on the agenda at that time that it's heard or dealt with, simply by raising their hand, and they'll get their chance to speak. Just a reminder that we treat each other respectfully and civilly. That's part of the city's tradition. And there's little need to say that, but at any rate, just a reminder. So with that, we'll have the roll call from ARPI, please.
Chair Amy Jones is absent. Commissioner Rona Bortz.
Here.
Commissioner Michelle Hammond.
Here.
Commissioner Casey Law.
Here.
Commissioner Bill Kelly.
Here.
Commissioner Michael Siegel.
Here.
And we have our council liaison, Mayor Pro Tem Cacciati is present. Thank you.
Okay, well, next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd all rise, I'll lead. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so the next thing then would be general public comment for items not on the agenda. I don't see anyone in the room likely to do that. ARPI, is there anyone on Zoom?
We do not have anyone on Zoom. There are no public comments.
No cards turned in. Okay, very good. So we'll go to the next item, which is really the key thing tonight and reason for the special meeting. The police and fire department fleet transition to battery electric vehicles. And we're being asked to make a recommendation to the city council on the proposal tonight. So I think Chief Zielinski may have a presentation or at least some comments to make.
Yes.
Welcome, Chief.
Well, thank you very much, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And for those of you that have not met me, my name is Brian Zielinski and I'm the police chief in South Pasadena. I wanted to start off this evening first by thanking you for holding this special meeting, especially before the holidays. The police department is very excited to present what we think is a cutting edge opportunity in terms of our fleet maintenance and moving forward with the electrification of our entire city fleet. So having said that, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on our fleet. And when I refer to fleet, that includes frontline vehicles, our detective vehicles, our admin vehicles as well. So the police department operates 23 vehicles. The average age is over 11 years old, some reaching up to 19 years. And the average mileage we have is about 100,000. We have some that exceed that, some a little bit lower. So if you can imagine, these cars are driven every day, 24 hours a day. They rack up miles pretty fast. And unlike a personal vehicle where you get a little bit of rest while you're at home, the vehicle has a chance to cool down and whatnot. Police vehicles or frontline emergency service vehicles don't have that luxury. So they are constantly going. So the wear and tear, the maintenance, and certainly the fuel costs, as we've all seen, they're all starting to rise and it's not getting any easier. I would say probably about 10, maybe 12 years ago, we looked at what a replacement program for our fleet would consist of. And that was always dependent, of course, upon the city finances. And we averaged anywhere between 1 to 3 vehicles a year, with obviously the average being 2. But what we've seen over the last couple of years is with the rising cost, with the aging fleet, that 2 vehicle a year replacement policy really isn't sound. It's not fiscally responsible. We're falling further and further behind. So with that, the police department really took, as I mentioned, a kind of a very robust and cutting edge look at what other options were available. As any business, of course, as we are, I'm sure all personally, we're being asked to do more with less. And especially as a government entity, the police department is looking how we can be better stewards of city and the public's money. So we started looking at different alternatives towards our fleet, financing alternative types of vehicles. And then we also looked at our city's policies in terms of the Green Action Plan and moving forward with climate and sustainable energy. And what we really looked at was electric vehicles. There's a couple police departments in California that are just starting to dip their toes in that pond, and they're testing them out. They've had great success, but South Pasadena, we would be one of the first in the nation that would transition, if approved, to go through to an entirely electric vehicle fleet. So having said that, I want to introduce Sergeant Tony Abdullah. He is the backbone behind this project in terms of the police department staff. He's done a lot of research. He's put a lot of effort into it, and I think you'll find his presentation very exciting. So thank you again. And without further ado, Sergeant Abdullah.
Thank you very much, Chief. Commissioners, good evening. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to be before you tonight to speak on a subject that the police department is really excited about. Our research into battery electric vehicles really began in earnest about 2 years ago, when we felt that the industry was on the verge of product maturity and that we could find a vehicle and vehicles, in fact, that would either meet or exceed our needs. It really intensified in March of 2020 when the result of our research and due diligence identified Tesla as the market leader in battery electric vehicles, and they produced and started deliveries of the Model Y. The Model Y is their crossover version, and that was released in March of 2020, and it was a form factor that we felt was most comparable to the Ford Explorers that we're using now, and that was suitable to our needs. We transport a lot of equipment and have a lot of demands, prisoners being placed in the car, and it was a size that was robust enough that we felt we can move forward with that. So we continued the research and started really identifying some elements that we felt were really critical to the success of an all BEV fleet. And some of those components, if you will, include, but they're not limited to, and they're in no particular order: safety, including both organizational safety ratings and advanced safety features; reliability; total cost of ownership; BEV product maturity; maintenance; energy expense; charging; technology; environmental impact over the entire vehicle life cycle, which includes supply chain, manufacture, use phase, and in the life phase; realizing city climate goals, and also related health benefits. And as I mentioned just a little bit earlier, that we identified Tesla as the clear BEV market leader that manufactured products that met or exceeded our needs. We also conducted comparison research. We wanted to identify any other law enforcement agencies across the US and in fact across the world that had already started to transition Tesla vehicles into their fleets. And as of this morning, we've identified 21 other law enforcement agencies in the United States that have integrated some Tesla vehicles into their fleet. They're generally one vehicle here, two there, the most being Aspen, Colorado, who has integrated 5 into their fleet. As of today, we would be the first law enforcement agency that we're aware of in the United States and possibly the world who would convert their entire fleet to battery electric vehicles. So we identified Fremont Police Department as really the primary law enforcement agency that did some really good research into Tesla vehicles. They did a 1-year pilot study with a 5-year life cycle comparison, and they identified some really interesting things in that study. One I think you'll find particularly interesting, and it has to do with the vehicle emissions from a patrol vehicle. The annual CO2 emissions from a gas-forward patrol vehicle estimates about 42,198 pounds of annual CO2 emissions. If we and the fire department were to convert all of our vehicles to BEVs and the fire department 3 vehicles to BEVs, that would mean an immediate reduction in CO2 emissions literally overnight. And as that applies to the climate action plan, the M.2 play GHG emissions reduction contribution through the electrification of the municipal fleet and mobile equipment is targeted for 23 metric tons by 2030. If we were to convert in 2022 to BEVs, that would result in a reduction of approximately 2,687 metric tons of CO2 by 2030, which would exceed the emissions goal as is in the cap by 2,664 metric tons, or 14.5% of the city's overall 2030 GHG emissions reduction target. It was really important during our research that we identified a manufacturer that with this conversion would have a meaningful impact, not only at our local level, but possibly at the national level and possibly international as well. As one of the attachments that we put in this report that we thought was really meaningful was the 2020 Tesla Impact Report that really details the environmental, social impacts of Tesla's operations, from supply chain through manufacture, through use phase and vehicle end of life. And we really drilled into that, and it's really apparent that Tesla is the market leader in mitigating negative climate impact. And we felt that it really clearly aligned with the city's climate goals. So with that, let me mention one more item that we identified, and I want to emphasize as being critical, a critical component to this project. And that's charging infrastructure. Our fleet demands reliability. That comes primarily through charging infrastructure. There is a parallel capital improvement project that's going on for the installation of charging infrastructure within the police department facilities that the fire department and police department have access to. Redundancy is also a key component to this solution. Tesla just opened a 20-stall supercharger site at Glen Arm in the 110 freeway, Pasadena freeway, just on the north end of our city. That was kind of the tipping point as well for us, because it provides what we feel is very reliable and redundant charging infrastructure. We source our electricity from Southern California Edison. For the supercharger site at Glen Arm and the 110 freeway, they source the electricity from Pasadena Water and Power. So having 2 separate energy providers mitigates our risk of concurrent power outages. So with that, we are seeking your recommendation to the City Council for approval of transitioning our entire fleet and the fire department's administrative fleet. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Put my mic on. Thank you. Why don't we go across, starting with Rona on the right there, my right.
I guess one of my questions was, had you looked at other, different types of electric cars and
Yes.
what did you, I guess, why Tesla specifically?
Thank you for that question. We felt that through our research and due diligence that Tesla was the only manufacturer of BEVs that had a mature product. When you look at the legacy OEMs, it's pretty readily apparent that they are struggling to manufacture BEVs at scale. GM, for example, on the recent recall with every Chevy Bolt that's ever been manufactured for battery pack fires. The other company that produced a potential candidate for us was Ford with their Mach-E. That has challenges as well. There's a significant recall in place for roofs detaching on that. There's also some performance issues with that vehicle as well that concern us. And I talked a little bit about producing at scale. To date, as of December 2nd, Ford has only produced 24,791 Mach-E's that they sell through dealers, which is problematic for us in the sense that when you have a vehicle in such limited production, we are seeing what they call market adjustments by the dealers upwards of $20,000 a vehicle. And that makes it cost prohibitive for us. Thank you.
Michelle, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'm really excited about the switch to EV for the whole fleet. I feel it's bold and ambitious, and I welcome it. I too also have similar kind of concerns with the choice of going forward with Tesla, and just have like a thorough search been done of other possible options. Did you find any other fleets or Lisa have done any trials with other models at all? Or is it just Tesla that has been tried out?
No, there have been. There are some other agencies that have adopted, I mentioned the Ford Mach-E, but on a very limited basis.
Mhm.
And some of them look like patchwork quilts, if you will. They'll integrate a couple Teslas. I'm aware of one department that's integrated a couple Teslas and a couple Mach-E's. It becomes problematic for us. We wanted consistency and continuity, especially when it comes to charging infrastructure. It'd be preferable for us to find a manufacturer that could produce the multiple models that suit our needs with similar charging infrastructure.
Mm.
The other thing that is really important to us, I mentioned one of the criteria we looked at was technology. Tesla is the only manufacturer right now that pushes out over-the-air software upgrades. And those software upgrades have improved range and multiple other safety factors as one of the recent updates that they've improved on. Safety is a key component to us, and there's no doubt that Tesla is the leader in that. They're the only ones that have a fleet of over 1 million vehicles right now. They capture real-time crash data from that. They annualize it, put it into a simulation. Then the results of that test, they do their own crash test. They build on the industry standard. Then they push out the modifications to the restraint systems in an over-the-air software upgrade. So each iteration of those software upgrades results in an improved vehicle. And right now, they're the only ones that are successfully doing that.
So you speak of their technology, but that's also one of my concerns with Tesla,
Sure.
is that their technology is so advanced and they really focus on data mining. So they have a very advanced artificial intelligence system that sends out data as far as like position of vehicles. I know one of the fleets that's was criticized by governments by not conducting an adequate assessment of data protection risks? Has there been anything that we've done in that area?
So that data, I can speak specifically to the crash data, is anonymized. So even though that they're getting that data from the vehicle, it is based on anonymity. There's no specific ownership information that's provided with us. So when we reviewed those issues, we're confident that there was no sensitive information that we'd be pushing up to Tesla that would be of concern to us.
Okay, and then for the charging infrastructure that was planned already for our city, for the police, and, part of the plan that you had already set out, that was originally planned for kind of a non-model specific or non-make specific charger, a fast charge, allowing us to shift if we wanted to in the future to a different car. If we went forward with this plan, would all of those chargers be Tesla?
If we went forward as proposed, yes, they'd all be, the in product would all be suitable to the Tesla specific charging requirement, but that terminates at the charger itself. Each charger for our application would be about $500 a charger. So the expense of that portion is minimal. If we at a later time came across a product that exceeded what Tesla has to provide and we wanted to migrate to that, we could do that with little expense.
Okay. Are they subsidizing any of this, or are we using our existing funds for a whole fleet?
There is a partnership that's going on with Southern California Edison, but perhaps Chief or could speak to that a little more detailed than I.
And
Not
is there a
perhaps.
reason the Ford Mustang or the Volkswagen ID isn't being considered? Those were both rated top above Tesla by Car and Driver last year.
Yes, we have concerns with the Mach-E, and there's two performance issues specifically with the Mach-E that's of concern.
And is that one of the Mustang model? Is
So-
that the Mustang model?
Yeah, the Mach-E Mustang. One is there's a software limiter on there that limits the acceleration to 5 seconds at a time. That could be problematic for us. The other is the traction control system during obstacle avoidance. It's called the Moose test, and it's losing the back end when it's going at a certain speed to avoid obstacles. And those two things are really deal breakers for us right now.
And what about the ID?
The ID, the form factor is appropriate, but again, Volkswagen is struggling to produce those at scale. As of right now, the deliveries for a Model Y, if we were to place the order today, would be delivered in June. Model 3s in February. So when it comes to battery pack and overall product maturity, we don't feel that it's at a point right now where it would be reliable for us for police use.
And has there been any research when you're comparing to those models for the long-term maintenance of those cars? Because I know in comparison, I'm sorry, I've researched the
Yeah.
cars just because I am an EV owner.
Right.
And I've gone through this process before, but as far as the maintenance costs of a Tesla as opposed to some of those others that I mentioned is rather high, especially if the Tesla needs any body work, if you're in a crash or anything like that. Also, if you need to replace the battery cost of a Tesla, I've heard is much higher than some of the other models. And Volkswagen in particular has more battery advancement for that in the future, like will be as a long-term choice, could be another option. I just wondered if you guys
Sure.
had looked at any of those.
I do actually. And I think Tesla mentions it probably better than I will in their impact report, but they speak specifically to the manufacturers of the battery cells and the battery pack. Right now, they're manufacturing battery packs that they believe will exceed the life of the vehicle, which is approximately 200,000 miles. Their next iteration of that is what they're calling the million-mile battery pack. So with the new factory coming online here at Giga, Texas, literally could be end of the year. And those manufacturers, by the time we get ours, we could be into that. But we're very confident right now that there will be no need to replace a Tesla battery, that they're already exceeding the life of the vehicles. And the ones that they're getting back to recycle now are from the very first iterations of the cars. And that was when the Fremont factory went online in 2010.
Okay. I think that's it. I mean, I do have some other, like, I've read some other studies from the Mustang performing really well in rigorous Michigan State Police testing, that it was the top rated choice for them. But I mean, as long as we could change out the Chargers, it's not my first choice. I feel
Sure.
like they're also, as far as a brand, kind of defiant against falling into public policy. And if we were to be on an ethical of supporting one brand over another, that wouldn't be my choice. But it looks like you've researched all the practical aspects of it, and I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
Michael?
Thank you for doing all this research. I also am excited about this. Do have a few questions. So when we're saying we're going to replace the entire fleet, is that all within the next fiscal year, or is it over a few years?
It would be, it's dependent upon the delivery. So it's proposed during this fiscal year, but there would be no lease payments or upfront one-time payment until we receive delivery. So based upon some of the delivery estimates, which are very fluid, depending on or if the council ultimately approves this project, we could be into the next fiscal year.
Pretty quickly.
Sure. I was asked to speak on the lease a little bit if that is. So we're proposing this through a vehicle lease program. The term typically is 60 months or 5 years. At the end of that lease, we have the ability to either buy the vehicles outright or use the equity in the fleet to do another 5 years. So when we asked the company that we're proposing to go with, which is Enterprise Fleet Management, we're projecting a 10-year cost savings of $215,881. And that has to do one of the components is the equity in the fleet and rolling that over into another lease. It's another reason we're looking at Tesla is they have the highest resale value of some of the other ones that we've come across. So when we apply the lease payment with the savings that we'll realize in maintenance and especially gas fuel savings, it is so significant that we can expect to realize that cost savings over a 10-year period.
Yeah, please.
Sorry that you said savings of 215,000. What is that in comparison to? I didn't understand the reference.
Yes, thank you. So the calculation for us is total cost of ownership, which would involve the lease payment plus our annual vehicle maintenance budget plus our annual fuel budget. And when we combine all those together into one pool, if you will, when we compare that already budgeted cost with the cost of the leasing program, the decrease in maintenance costs and the decrease in energy costs, we can expect to realize a little over $215,000 cost savings over that 10-year span. I can give you a real good example of just the energy savings. On the second page of the staff report, there's a matrix there, and I found the cost for capacity fill particularly interesting. The ranges you'll notice are almost the same. They're a little over 300 miles each. At the city plan average for electricity is about 10 cents a kilowatt hour on average. So to fill that to capacity with a 74 kilowatt hour battery pack, you're looking at $7.40 to the city to fill that to capacity. Contrast that with the gas Ford patrol vehicle that we have now with the range of 344 miles, 18.6 gallon tank. Again, to fill that to capacity, we're looking at $70.87 based upon $3.81 per gallon, which was the last city purchase of fuel. So the cost savings is dramatic when it comes to fuel and energy.
So I echo some of the concerns about Tesla and the data gathering, and that brings up another question just about new policy that you guys might institute around the cars and possibly around data, but another would be self-driving, right? Hopefully we're not allowing the officers to engage self-driving while on duty. What policies have you looked at about possibly changing by going to this route instead of with the normal Ford gas cars?
Thank you for that question. I know that's a concern for many when we talk about Teslas and their autopilot and full self-driving. I think it's important to note that full self-driving is a different product from autopilot, and it's in beta right now. Tesla releases a quarterly safety report that details crash data from their fleet, which now is over 1 million vehicles. Based upon the Q2 2021 crash data, a vehicle that's on autopilot is 9 times less likely to be involved in a collision than the US average. That I would call a more mature product that's already been in release for quite some time versus the full self-driving beta that's in version 10.6 right now. That is still emerging. I would not suggest or forecast that we would be beta testers in that program by any means. Autopilot could be something that's a little different, but I think those are discussions, get input from concerned people like yourselves, so we can formulate that policy as we move forward, because there's nothing drafted as of right now to address that.
I think my other questions were answered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Casey.
Okay, thanks. So I thank you for the presentation and the research. Yeah, as I echo everyone's statements. I was interested in the power reliability question, and you mentioned that SoCal Edison is here, and that Pasadena DWP manages the nearest Tesla station charging. What sort of emergencies might conceivably knock out both the energy providers, and what situation might that arise in?
The one that comes to mind that I've had experience with personally was a wind event that we've had. It was probably 15 years. How many? 2011, quite some time ago. That was a challenge in that we lost power for days at a time. So potentially that could be an issue. The attractive thing to us about Tesla, again, with their supercharging network, is they just crossed the 30,000 number for superchargers. So we're not restricted to just the one at Glen Arm and the freeway. There's one in Glendale, there's two in Pasadena. There's many in the region. So in order to have an outage that would affect the entire Southern California region, I would imagine to be pretty cataclysmic and I don't much like to think about, but we're pretty confident that there will be availability to supercharging as needed.
It's true. Yeah, it is true that most outages are small and local, but yeah, it is a concern. I mean, once every 10 years might have been a trend in the past, which will be more frequent in the future if there
Sure.
are more wind events or heat events. So
Another idea that comes to mind is we're exploring options to become self-sustainable in that. So if the city elects to put in a charging infrastructure with solar panels that is appropriately sized and is fed to battery storage, and we in turn use that to power our fleet, not only does it reduce our costs, it's essentially free for us, don't count the amount that was spent on the infrastructure itself, but we also become self-sustainable and not dependent upon that. So we have a number of different options, but building in energy redundancy and charging redundancy in this program is super important to us.
right, very good. And I think that touches on a point that's very much of interest to this commission, which is transitioning the city broadly, right? And so having power generated in the city is very interesting. So for the most part, this document and also the Fremont, I guess, experience was that the infrastructure was someone else's problem. And we were told in this plan that that's also the case, that it will be taken care of through a different program or different funding. Is that sufficient, or do we need to talk about the way that's funded?
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Casciati and Sergeant Abdullah. So an update on our Charge Ready program, that's the program we're talking about that would partially fund this work. The idea, as Mayor Pro Tem had pointed out, is that Edison would cover the costs and actually perform the installation of the charging infrastructure up until the charger component in the city hall parking lot. So as Mayor Pro Tem had mentioned, the Public Works Department sought applications in several locations throughout the city to implement this charging infrastructure. And a city can be successful in this program when they implement enough chargers to make it worth Edison's while on a per charger basis. And because the uniqueness of the lot, where we're able to implement around 35, 36 level 2 chargers, that's what the Edison's program covers right now, is level 2 chargers. They are willing to move forward on the charging infrastructure for both the police lot, the fire lot, and the staff parking lot behind City Hall. So if this item moves forward tonight, our next step would be going to City Council next week to move forward on an MOU with Edison so that they can begin the environmental review and the design documents to install that charging infrastructure. I was gonna say one more thing. What it takes from the city's perspective is a commitment to purchase the chargers, maintain them for 10 years, and then also pay for network services so that the chargers can be monitored and the information can be reported back to Edison. Yes, Commissioner Hammond.
So with this program, we're only limited to using type 2 chargers?
For Edison's charging infrastructure program, where they build the charging infrastructure, right now it's limited to level 2 chargers. So that doesn't stop the city from adding other level 3 chargers into this infrastructure. It's just the charging infrastructure for the level 3 chargers would not be covered. We do have one level 3 charger that's already covered through an air quality from the Mobile Source Reduction Committee grant that's being installed in the next couple of months in the City Hall parking lot. And the idea would be to add other level 3 chargers as we increase the police fleet.
I mean, for my perspective, type 2 is usually best applicable at a home or overnight type of situation. And from what I understood of the existing police fleet, isn't most of those cars end up going back home with certain police owners, or do they stay on site?
I'm going to direct that
So-
question.
Generally, all the police vehicles, except the ones assigned to canine handlers, remain here at the station. So it's a very limited number that may go home.
And how many stations are we putting in?
So across the entire lot, we're looking to put in 36 or so stations. That would probably mean about 16 stations in the police slot alone for level 2 chargers.
Mhm.
Now, the idea would be that level 3 chargers are necessary for the police vehicles that need to rotate out quickly. But for the other detective vehicles or patrol vehicles, they would have an opportunity to charge much longer and be able to be on this level 2 charger.
I mean, as you had described earlier, police vehicles are driven 24 hours all the time, high mileage. So a type 3 charger would be much more conducive to be able to be ongoingly charged for a whole fleet. It seems like a type 2 might not be the best scenario in that
The
case. 'Cause it
Tesla
takes-
at their Texas Gigafactory in Austin, in many of the parking lots, they've installed type 2s for employee use. There are several banks of superchargers that are the 250 kilowatt hour superchargers or level 3.
Employees totally makes sense because you park your car and then you're in the office for the day.
Right.
But for a police use vehicle, the patrol unit is a much different.
We're looking
scenario.
at a blend.
Yeah, so
of
I think
level 3 and level 2. The nice thing again is if we have a need to supercharge, if it's not sufficient at any given time here, we can go to a supercharger site and for 15 minutes, we get an extra 200 miles of range.
Yeah.
So we have kind of the best of both worlds plan, if
Okay.
you will.
We also have the opportunity, because the level 3 charger that we are putting in in the next few months. The city has the control to interrupt the charge if someone else is using that charger in the city staff lot
Mhm.
size, so that the police can utilize that level 3 charger when if necessary.
Okay. Yeah, because love type 2 is an hour, is 44 miles for an hour of a charge. Oh,
What we're gonna recommend,
with the
just
Tesla adapter, yeah, they get a higher rate.
what we're recommending, and it's just kind of a general standard operating procedure, that anytime the vehicle, anytime the police officers come in to write a report, or if there's at the station, they can throw it on the charger if it's within the recommended range. Just so they don't have range anxiety and you don't hear any stories of them in a pursuit and it running out of charge. We look at that as an operator issue and not a function of the EV itself, because like showed before, the ranges are comparable.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I would just love if we do have a future plan to put a few more fast chargers here, so that I don't drive by Glen Arm and just see police on break all the time at the faster chargers.
You have my vote.
I, you know,
Yeah,
Right,
the
right.
time
No,
I-
it's I'm totally about a balance. That's completely understandable. I just think more than one fast charge, just to have more police fleet at top level ready to be responsive.
oh,
Potentially, yes.
Casey, did you have more? You were.
I did, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
No, but
yeah.
it's good discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you.
right.
Okay, yeah, so let's see here. I guess one open-ended question, what do we get from being first?
Hopefully to inspire others to adopt the same methodology and type of program that we are. We see a lot of value in that. Traditionally in law enforcement, it's difficult to implement change in some areas, but it makes it easier for more agencies down the line to do it when they have somebody else that they can point to that was successful at it. So that's our goal, is to inspire
Sure,
other
it's a-
agencies.
It's a point of pride, and certainly this mission appreciates the value of implementing the
It can add,
cap.
you know,
that was-
transportation accounts for so much of the CO2 emissions.
Absolutely. yeah.
Overall greenhouse emissions, that if we can be a part of significantly reducing that in the industry that we work in, that would definitely be a source of pride for us.
Okay, and let's see here. I think that covers my questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I wanted to just first of all commend you on the proposal, the development of it, and I think it's important for cities, you know, to display leadership, to sort of walk the talk. And we have a climate action plan, and this is part of it. And so this is an important step in actually implementing the plan rather than letting it sit on the shelf. And I also want to commend you for remembering a report that was done, I think, back in 2009 on renewable energy and its potential for the city to have solar panels with a battery, so that the city would be able to function, particularly the public safety services, during a massive power outage, which, as we know, can occur at any time almost. I do have a series of questions about it and some suggestions maybe for the report when it goes to the council. So I'd like to go through those. first of all, related to level 3 chargers and level 2, I understand that not all the police vehicles are used for patrol, so that they're used more to go to court or to serve warrants, different types of, or going undercover, that sort of thing, but not probably used 24/7 the way the patrol cars are. How many patrol cars typically are out in the field at a given time?
Thank you for that question. Under this proposal, 10 of the vehicles would be Model Ys for patrol
Okay,
and 10 would be for administrative use. And you're absolutely correct. The ones that are slated for patrol operate on a 24/7 basis. However, at any given time, you're probably looking at 4 to 6 patrol vehicles on
That-
any
that are
given
out.
shift.
in service.
Correct.
And the other question I had is, how many miles are those patrol vehicles driven annually on average? And I would encourage you to put that number in
Okay.
the staff report.
Thank you.
At some point.
Average for the patrol vehicles that we have quoted in the lease quotes, we're estimating 14,000 miles per vehicle for the patrol vehicles and 8,000 miles annually for the administrative and detective vehicles.
Okay. So I'll go to this later, but I had questions on the table that's in here.
Sure.
Series of questions. So as I understand it, you can't buy a police car, off the assembly line made by Detroit. You buy a vehicle and then you have to retrofit it to meet the special needs of a police force. So with the gas-powered vehicles, that retrofitting for police use, you say averages around 13,000 per vehicle, so 12,000, slightly shy of 13,000.
That's correct.
With the electric Tesla Model Y, would be 17,000, and then there's additional modifications of 4,000. Can you explain the difference?
I'd be happy to. In the first, or actually the second row, the standard equipment upfitting costs. Those are for items such as prisoner partitions, push bars, lights, sirens, equipment like that. Because of the, I guess I would say, newness of the Model Y coming to the fleet, there's some increased costs related to that specifically because there are no economies of scale in play yet. There's still new emerging manufacturers that will make custom equipment for the Model Y. So we're going to a custom upfitter for that. The $4,000 change, which is a modification above and beyond the standard equipment, relates to ballistic panels that would be put into the front and rear passengers' doors that don't exist in our existing police vehicles, but we've identified that as a need moving forward. So we would actually, if we chose to stay the course with our ICE vehicles, we would anticipate incorporating that cost into any new vehicle that we acquire.
Okay, thank you. So I think that would be helpful too. I mean, because the council may have, presuming we approve this tonight, may have questions
Sure.
in that regard to explain, the differences. The other thing I was wondering is, so with the patrol vehicles, when the city no longer needs them, they're sold, or how are they dealt with, and how would these leased vehicles be treated at the end of the lease, presuming that the city is done with the vehicle and wants a new one?
Sure.
What happens to the vehicles at that point?
Thank you for that. Our
They're
existing,
specialized, they've been retrofitted.
right. Our existing process now, when we decommission the vehicle, is to remove all equipment that is still serviceable and then have that installed in a new vehicle.
Okay.
I anticipate that if we decide to renew the lease, that equipment would again be decommissioned and then replaced, whatever serviceable replaced on the new vehicles. So potentially there's a reduction in upfitting costs at that point. Our existing vehicles, I believe, are sold at auction right now, because we own them.
Yeah.
On the vehicle lease, one of the interesting things about that, right now, it's estimated that we have about $139,000 in existing equity in our fleet that we will apply to the one-time down payment to get into the lease. At the end of 5 years, the estimated equity is going to be in the $345,000 range. So with that increased in equity due to the increased resale value of the Teslas, allows us to reduce costs getting into a new 5-year lease. We have more of that equity. So it could be attractive to us at that point to roll over into a new lease agreement.
Mhm. And the other question on the lease then is typically leases, have a mileage cap on them, and then you pay per mile over that when you return the vehicle if you don't sell it yourself. How would that work with the leases through Enterprise of these Teslas?
Thank you. We have addressed that with Enterprise, and you're absolutely correct. They have us quoted again for 14,000 miles on the patrol vehicles and 8,000 on the admin and detective vehicles. However, in the quotes, there is no, and I verified it, there is no increased charge for exceeding that mileage.
There's no increased charge?
Correct.
Okay. The other thing I had a question about is the emissions estimate here. So this is for 1 year, I take it, the 42,000 pounds, 21 tons. So, and it says, according to the memo, EPA estimates that a car will emit around 19 pounds per gallon of CO2. So my question is, how many miles is this emission estimate for the gas-powered cars based on in this table?
And
particularly?
thank you very much for that question, because I struggled with that as well. It looked really high to me. And what I came to understand is the EPA estimates are based upon per mile usage. What a lot of people don't realize, and why it doesn't apply to necessarily to a patrol vehicle, is patrol vehicles, when they're in service out in the field, they're often left at idle.
Right.
You can see them on traffic stops, traffic accident scene, crime scenes. They could be left literally for hours on idle to maintain all the equipment that's in the car. Those emissions don't show up in any per mile calculation. So that's why the increased number, and this is an actual number from Fremont PD that they did in their study and that they found was valid, that incorporated the idle issues along with the per mile issues. But I did segment it in our report because I wanted it to be as accurate as I felt the estimates could be. So I calculated half at the 10 vehicles at that annual CO2 emissions. And then I used the per mile average for the average vehicle for the EPA estimates for the administrative and detective fleet.
And so I've read at least that police vehicles, if you want to buy one, say that's at auction, are high mileage, even though the odometer may not show high mileage because of this idling. So how will that work for you with the electric Teslas then, when you have to idle for, an hour, or, that so much of the use is idling?
Sure. It affects range, overall range,
Uh-huh.
and battery pack percentage. There are no agencies that we're aware of the 21 that I spoke about, that have reported back any range issues based upon the equipment that they put in there. The nice thing about equipment that's being installed now versus when I first came on the job 30-some years ago is there's been great advancements in the efficiency of the electronics that are put into the car.
Mhm.
So lights now are LEDs, much less draw than the than the lights of past. Computers, much more efficient than they have in the past. So there is an impact, but it's not significant enough to where we think it's going to be an issue.
Okay. And just wanted to say to fellow commissioners that there's little question really that Tesla is the gold standard, of electric cars. They have been making them consistently and growing. They're selling them internationally. They're way ahead of the traditional, the legacy manufacturers in the United States. And so I think they would, despite the fact that it's a prestige vehicle, that it's a sound vehicle, that has an established track record, and the company will stick with these vehicles. I think going forward, they have that track record. The domestic auto manufacturers will release vehicles. They will, quit producing them in 2 or 3 years and change the model. Or this has been the history of GM and Ford when it comes to EVs, for 20-some years. They just haven't been consistent about it. So I don't have a problem with the Tesla if the economics of it work. So I just wanted to say that, for the record. I did have one other question about this. So these vehicles, police have traditionally not used electric vehicles. They have been resistant to the idea of electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles even, and have wanted to use gas-powered vehicles. What can you just address, how doing this might change attitudes of neighboring police departments, or what's going on in terms of the police agencies and their view of electric vehicles at this time that's making you, feel very comfortable in moving in this direction?
Sure.
And,
Thank you for that question. I think for us, it was issues of product maturity, much like the issues that you talked about, that we felt that an EV that was being produced would be reliable enough for us to put into patrol use. Secondly is form factor. There really wasn't a vehicle before the Model Y that met our needs for the amount of room that we need in there. So with those two forces kind of combining now, and with the adoption getting more traction, it's opening eyes of other law enforcement agencies that because of you get a better performing vehicle. You get a better performing vehicle with little to no preventative maintenance. We expect ours to be tires and windshield wiper fluid. You get a better performing vehicle that costs significantly less for energy than what we're paying now. You get a better performing vehicle. And that is what really sells the Teslas. Tesla, I don't know if you're all aware, but their advertising budget annually is zero, When you look at the legacy OEMs, they're spending in the billions of dollars for advertising. And Tesla calls it butts in the seats. When they get a person into the car, they feel like the car sells itself. And obviously from their success, that it's pretty proven. So for us, I kind of anticipate the same thing. The more that you have agencies, I think like us, that are taking a leadership position in that area, the more comfortable other agencies are going to be with adopting the same thing. They'll get more exposure to it. They'll see us, providing mutual aid. It'll be a talking point. Hey, what do you think about this? And then it just kind of word of mouth goes from there.
Well, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Anyone else have further questions or? Michelle, go ahead.
There's one more, but it's not about the Tesla. It's more, is there a plan, since we're talking about electrifying the fleet and the city? Is there anything on deck for the bicycle fleet that has been talked about? Will we also be going into any e-bike purchases in the future? Could that be an idea of, Casey, like your concerns about the 10-year power outage that might end up being more frequent, in the sense like with e-bikes, you can have battery storage. You could buy multiples that could be implemented and carry you over for a couple of days and still get places pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Has there been any talk for that as well?
Not as it's related to this project, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe we have a couple EVs right now. E-bikes. Thank you. So especially as we advance in our careers, we're definitely proponents of e-bikes. And yeah, I'm sure this would probably be a good catalyst to eventually, electrifying everything.
It's exciting. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
You have an answer for every question. It's impressive.
I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. Is there any discussion at this point, or does anyone want to make any motion?
Well, should we discuss Michelle's point about being sort of tied to, we have specific recommendations related to being tied to specific technologies, or is that settled by the question, by the? Okay.
Michelle, give an example of what a concern might be that you have, why you have this. What would the negative situation be that you could see arise?
It was that the Tesla artificial intelligence sends up data, such as position, automatically the police force. This was the police force down this data. The data is shared from their vehicles. If there's a way to trace that data is shared.
Why?
That's not something that anybody else is concerned about. I just get concerned about any type of data that's always.
You're talking about real-time location data being.
That it gets automatically. And it could be gathered. Or, and that, I just was wondering if there has been anything that there's potential on that. Is there anything that we could, that Tesla, like specific for our fleet, just like the auto. Or we do that for our fleet, that can be in place, and you'll have to say for the other one, the data is not gonna do that. But some of the technology advancements that also have to do with a lot of data there, is that something?
I can speak a little bit to how they're using that data if it's appropriate and might be helpful. Most of that data that's sent, probably the best illustration I can give is to enhance vehicle safety. If you'd like, there's a video that Tesla posted to YouTube about a month ago now that explains how they capture real-time crash data from the fleet. They analyze that data, put it into a simulation, then formulate their own crash test that they believe is better than the industry standard. So we see a benefit to that. When it comes to AI, which I think is your concern, the way that Tesla is iterating the full self-driving is they take data from the 8 cameras in the car, they feed it into the neural nets, which have an AI engine to it, and it learns and it iterates from there. Right now, where they're at with that is they're just doing edge cases. So they're taking unusual occurrences that require a driver intervention and to essentially take it off of FSD. And then that data is sent to Tesla to train the neural net. So those 2 cases, if Tesla were to, capture that data from us, it wouldn't be a concern to us because it is enhancing the product safety and of which we're obviously be a proponent of. I hope that's.
My concerns aren't as much with the data collecting as, my overall, I think my only discussion points would be the charging infrastructure, which you already answered, is that if we wanted to change that over at the charge point, the minimum cost, I think is great. And then that we just have maybe 2 fast charge options as well, instead of just 1, or to be able to adequately make sure that the 10, was it 10 that you mentioned of the patrol? Yeah. Never 10 at once, but 4 to 6 at once that are always out. But idling again is another thing that draws the battery. So it would just be great if we could put that or add an attachment on our other one. That would be my recommendation, just to make sure that we're adequately covered.
I guess, and I would just reiterate what you said the first time, which is that I still feel actually like the privacy question is open in my mind, and that might be something that we could recommend as a specific issue that should be delineated in a contract, right? Which is that the anonymity has some, ability to be audited, and we can trust that it's truly anonymous. I'm sympathetic to that concern. And the other one actually is, I'm not sure I'm convinced that over-the-air updates are actually security enhancing features because they actually change the performance of the vehicle. I understand that you can make it more fuel efficient and then you can make it behave differently, but the fact that someone in Fremont is going to change the way your vehicle behaves seems like a security concern to me. I'm sorry, that's not.
Yeah, no, that's,
We're
I mean,
actually
that's an
talking here.
interesting point. I haven't come across any of the OTA updates where I've seen anything that's been a red flag as a security concern for me. All of them have been enhancements that we would be in favor of. I can't think of something that would go out that would either degrade the existing vehicle. I'll keep an eye out for that, but I haven't come across.
Well,
anything.
it's certainly not the intention to degrade the vehicle
Sure.
performance, but it is a change, and I would think that it's
One
a
thing
concern.
that occurred recently that I felt was very impressive, and it kind of speaks to your point too, is something that is installed that's problematic was it was an FSD update They're doing software iterations of that about every 2-week cadence now. And one was released and there was some unintended consequences from that were occurring vehicle behavior with that for the beta testers. Tesla became aware. They, over the air, they rolled back to a previous software version. Then overnight, their AI team fixed what the issue was. And about 12 hours after that, they rolled out a new version with the fix. So I'm confident that if they do come across an issue that's problematic, they have both the capability and willingness to fix it. That makes sense.
Go ahead. Oh, that's what I was saying is Tesla's a very well-established company. They support their products. They have a record of consistency with EVs that the other manufacturers frankly don't have. I mean, they've never, I pushed EVs a lot when I was at the Air Quality Management District in the 90s when the EV1 came out. And, it just, there's never been a consistency, in their approach to it, which I think is what Michael was saying. And I think it's very important for a public entity, if you're going to, we've seen examples of cities buying, the city of LA buying EVs, a lot of EVs, and not using them very much, because they didn't have the range and, there were other problems. Tesla doesn't have those problems, and so I think is the reason why a Tesla is probably a good choice, is a good choice. So, that's my own point of view. Any further discussion, questions? Okay. Is anyone ready to make a motion or not? Or what are we going to do here?
Yeah, and I would like to make a motion to, what does it say exactly? Is it
Just,
to,
just to recommend to
recommend-
the city council.
yeah, recommend the Tesla electric vehicle purchase to the city council.
Is anyone willing to second?
I'll second.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I mean,
Sure,
it's,
I don't see it. I
it's
don't
up
have
to
it
you. It's the
anymore.
first paragraph, I think,
Sorry.
of the report.
Okay.
But,
All right. All right, I would like to make a motion to recommend that the commission review and recommend to the city council, the police department, transition their entire vehicle fleet and the fire department transition their administrative vehicle fleet to battery electric vehicles.
I'll second.
Okay. Arpi, can you call the roll?
Yes. All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Boards, and seconded by Commissioner Law. Commissioner Boards,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammond,
Yes.
Commissioner Law,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Siegel,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, we'll go on then. We're near the conclusion of the meeting, and the paper I have doesn't have the rest of the agenda on it. But I think we typically have commissioner comments, city council liaison comments,
We,
and
Commissioner
approval of
Kelly?
minutes. That would be the next item. Pardon me, but
Okay.
I wasn't prepared to chair. So does anyone have any comments on the minutes from the previous meeting? Okay, does anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
Okay, do we need a roll call or we do it by voice?
seconded.
Rona?
Okay.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstain? Okay. So then the next item will be comments from our city council liaison. Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you. Next is Commissioner Communications, so we'll just go across.
I don't have anything today. Thanks.
I have nothing as well.
I just quickly wanted to talk about the city bike ride we had last month. I attended with my family. I saw a few of you others there as well. I think we had about 100 bikers come out. There was a lot of people on bicycles. I heard Mayor Pro Tem's words as well as Senator Portantino's words and their excitement about commuting by bike. So clearly there's just a lot of pouring out of people who want this. And I don't necessarily see it on the streets. And I think it's just because it doesn't feel safe to do it. And so I would love to see, since we have so much excitement for it from the city, as well as from our city council and our Senator Portantino, that we push more towards trying to get some of these things passed in our various plans. We got the bike plan sitting on a shelf from 10 years ago, the climate action plan, even the master plan has multimodal elements that would do wonders. And so I'd just love to see a push in 2022, considering that there's so much excitement for it, to drive to meet some of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Excellent, thank you.
I have no comments except to say happy holidays. Go ahead.
No comments for me, thanks.
Next is ARPI with staff communications.
So first, I just wanted to thank the police department so much for coming out and giving such a wonderful presentation. We are very excited to see where we're headed, and we are here to support you. The only updates that I had for you, wanted to mention again that we did have our leaf blower demonstration this morning at Eddy Park. Our second one of many, so we'll have several more next year. We'll try to spread them out throughout the city so that we can get more people involved, and any kind of information we get on incentives that are out there, we will surely be passing them on to everybody. In addition, update on the SB 1383 organics ordinance. Last week, we had our second reading and adoption of the ordinance. So that is now in effect. So starting January 1st, all residents will take their food scraps, and instead of putting them in their regular trash, they will put them along with their yard waste. So nothing else changes at this moment. We are still working with our waste hauler and the Athens Contract Ad Hoc Committee to finalize any type of rate changes or any service level changes. So that's still in the works. However, because the ordinance is now in place, we will have all residents, I'll say it one more time, the only change that we're having, all food scraps, instead of throwing it in the trash, will now be combined with your yard waste. Containers are not changing at this moment. Service level is not changing at this moment. So we will definitely be pushing out a robust outreach effort to all our residents to let them know of this change. We understand we're going to have a transition phase. There's going to be a learning curve, but we are working with our waste hauler to ensure that everyone's getting that information. So that will be coming out soon as well. And lastly, we are still working, we had a commissioner brought up a good point on our work plan coming up. We are putting that on hold at the moment. We're doing a deep dive on our the structure of our commissions. And so right now, any type of annual report or work plan or appointments are on hold. So we're all going to be here together again next year. No meetings in December besides this one, this special one. So our next meeting will be January 25th. And that's all for me. Ted, did you have any? Ted had also something to add.
Good evening. So in the spirit of our special meeting tonight, I just want to give a quick, and I'll be very brief, update on some of the other electrification projects we have in the city. So thank you again for coming tonight, Chief Slinsky, Sergeant Abdullah, Lieutenant Shannon, I'm sorry, I don't know your last name. So when we applied for different charge-ready projects throughout the city through Edison, and that is, we explained what that was earlier in terms of them bringing infrastructure into different locations. We looked at City Hall. We looked at the Public Works Yard at 825 Mission. We looked at the CNG station over in the Loman and Stony in the middle of the Arroyo Seco complex there. We looked at Arroyo Park North. And we also looked at the library and the senior center. So as I was mentioning earlier, really for this to be worth Edison's while, it's about the cost of implementing the chargers divided by the number of chargers, cost per charger. And so quickly, well, not quickly, over months, a lot of those projects sort of fell away as Edison wasn't able to accommodate this program, this specific level 2 charge ready program at some of those sites. We tried very hard with the library several times, and actually Edison was quite gracious in trying to figure out if we could do them on different streets, you know, on the 4 streets around the library at where the transformer was located. We also tried at the CNG station. So we are not able to move forward with those projects at this time with the Charge Ready program. But on the radar is the Arroyo Park project, which started out at 4 chargers and then went to 8 and then to 10. And now we think we've negotiated if we can do 12 in that area that would support the baseball fields there. We can probably get an agreement in place to implement chargers there. But we're not as far along in that process as we are with the city lot. The city lot, we actually have a conceptual plan and more information, and we can actually move into an agreement starting next week, and I'll get into that in one moment. But with that, we have not gotten the feedback from Edison other than that we think that's the good balance for number of charges that lot. So as Mayor Pro Tem had mentioned, there's a lot of moving parts here, and we essentially have to get started with the project so we can implement other pieces of it. Level 3 chargers or higher capacity chargers for not just quick charging police vehicles, but for other vehicles in the city, like community services buses, for fire vehicles. There's other programs we might be able to take advantage here, like Edison's transport program to implement infrastructure for those. There's also other programs when it comes to solar power and battery backup power. We're looking at implementing the beginning of an MOU with the Clean Power Alliance Power Ready program at Garfield Reservoir. Also be discussed at City Council next week. And that right there is basically starting a commitment to see if we can, if the Clean Power Alliance can package our site with other sites in the region to basically go out to bid to have a developer come in and build solar infrastructure and battery power, and then come to an agreement about basically a financed power, what would be the word for it? Like a financed power market where some of the power generated is basically returned back to the grid and finances the city's implementation of the solar solar power and battery backup. And then the added advantage of the city is that in an event where we have a power loss, we're able to use a percentage of that power to power, I keep saying power, but basically to charge whatever we need to run at that Garfield Reservoir. So once we take this first step with the police lot and with this charge infrastructure program, we can take additional steps for other chargers, for solar, for battery backup. But all of these depend on feasibility studies and environmental impacts, and even the Charge Ready program itself. When we move forward with the city lot, on the publicly accessible side of the lot, there's ADA infrastructure upgrades we have to make. Edison won't cover other improvements that we make, for example, for solar panels. We have to do that separately, but also in Congress with the infrastructure that's being implemented there. So there's a lot of stuff to do in the coming year and years. And so we're working on all these things somewhat simultaneously, but tonight we've taken the first step here. So any questions about that? Some of them will be. So there will be chargers in the police slot, which is on the west side, and then chargers in the center lot, the fire lot, and then the chargers on the east side will be accessible to the public. And so that's part of us implementing, in a network infrastructure so that people can actually pay for charging. It won't be free. And then the city basically has a infrastructure in place to put that money in to pay for the electricity and to pay for the charging equipment. Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone.